Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this new European Bauhaus webinar hosted by the European Crafts Alliance. My name is Siobhan, and I'm delighted to be guiding this session this morning. It's really great to see so many people joining us. As you settle in, please feel free to say hello in the chat. We would also love to know where you're joining us from. I see Spain, Berlin, Portugal, UK. Great. Before we officially begin, I would like to share some housekeeping items. Firstly, we kindly ask you to review our privacy notice on the screen now. So to interact with us today, we have two features available, which is the chat and the Q&A. These are located at the bottom of your screen. So the chat function is for connecting. Please use this space to say hello, share where you're joining us from, or discuss your thoughts with each other. We'll also be sharing some useful links there throughout the session. The Q&A function is for your questions. So if you have a specific question for our speakers, please submit it into the Q&A box. You can also view questions from other attendees and upvote the ones that you find most interesting. We will gather all of your submitted questions and address as many of them as possible during our Q&A session at the end. So I'd like to start by sharing some background information about us. The European Crafts Alliance, or ECA, or ECA for short, is a European network dedicated to advocating for, promoting, and protecting the craft sector. Our network is currently made up of 44 members across 24 countries, and most of our members are the national and regional craft and design organizations and associations around Europe. The new European Bauhaus, or the NEB for short, is a creative interdisciplinary movement by the European Commission that forms the cultural soul of the European Green Deal. It calls on all of us to build a future that is sustainable, inclusive, and beautiful. The European Crafts Alliance has been an official partner of the new European Bauhaus initiative since 2021 through our wider NEB webinars program, which explores how craft supports the NEB ambitions through different themes and inviting guest speakers to share their real-world stories with you. So this particular webinar is an official satellite event of the NEB Festival, which is taking place this week in Brussels and internationally, and we are very happy to bring this conversation to the festival today. That brings us to the focus of our webinar, the role of crafts in well-being across life stages. This topic follows our recently published landmark study on crafting health and well-being, which was conducted by our research partner at the University of Eastern Finland. We presented the findings of this research at our annual conference at the end of April, and the response to this research has been very positive. So the report proves what many of us know instinctively for years, that making things by hand is a vital asset for our physical health, for our mental well-being, and for our social connections. So today we really want to delve deeper into these findings. We want to take a look at how craft impacts people, communities, and society across an entire life course, from childhood through to adulthood and then into our senior years. We will be exploring this journey through the lens of the three core new European Bauhaus values, which are inclusion, aesthetics, and sustainability. Looking to our program, we have 4 fantastic speakers joining us this morning, and soon we will start with a keynote presentation to lay the groundwork for this topic, followed by 3 inspiring case studies that bring us through these 3 life stages. We're going to end the webinar with a live Q&A session where our speakers will be answering your questions submitted in the Q&A that is linked at the bottom of your screen. So to kick off, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Anna Kirketerp. Anna recently joined us at our annual conference in Florence, and we are delighted to welcome her back for this webinar. Anna is the founder and CEO and pioneer of craft psychology, as well as a trained craft teacher. Her interdisciplinary research integrates neuroscience, psychology, and the motivation to explore the health-promoting effects of making. Formerly a research leader at Aarhus University, Anna directs a certification program in craft psychology in Denmark and lectures internationally, translating scientific insights into practical evidence-based methods. We have invited Anna to share with you how craft functions as a powerful cross-generational intervention, showing how making builds cognitive reserve in youth, provides stress regulation for adults, and supports active aging for seniors. Anna, thank you so much for joining us. I welcome you now to share your screen and start your presentation. And as a reminder to our audience, we welcome you to submit your questions in the Q&A.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I am so delighted that I have the opportunity to share craft psychology and the very core issues of why craft has a beneficial health promoting effect across life stages. So thank you for the very good introduction to who I am, so I don't need to do that. And I will start by defining craft psychology and the core things about why it's so good for us. And as you said, craft psychology will, for many of you, when you read about it or hear about it, you will say, oh, I knew that already. But so many people have had this recognition that when you hear about effects or you hear about, oh, when I do small repetitive movements and that has a calming effect on my body, maybe you didn't actually were aware of that effect on your body comes from these small repetitive movements, and you should maybe enhance that more in your life. So many of the effects in craft, we know them already, but by being more aware of what is it actually that delivers well-being in all ages, that's maybe something that can be more beneficial then. So yeah, craft psychology is the area that I have developed, and I have looked at all the literature, and that created all these overall effects that when I looked upon all the literature and all the people that I asked, when people do craft, no matter if they are 5 years or 100 years, you will form 5 overall effects, meaning most people will sense that this being completely immersed in doing craft, meaning flow, and having the other effect of calming your nervous system down because you are doing something that is repetitive, or you have this feeling of joy and happiness, and you are maybe being very proud of the thing that you produce, and you are thinking about someone that you love while doing it. So all the positive emotions that we as a human race have very difficulty having enough of, because we have what's called negativity bias. So every person throughout life stages, we need to have something in our lives that will conduct, or where we can actually promote positive emotions. And doing craft very often leads to, before we do it, we look forward to doing it. And while doing it, we are filled with all these positive emotions like hope and joy and interest and humor and all these emotions. And after, we can measure that when people have been engaged in very flow generating activities, you can measure that their mood and well-being are enhanced half an hour later, and also more than that if you look at what the beneficial effects are. I will come back to that later. And the fourth effect that's visible is this achievement. It's not because you should do something where you feel that you should achieve something to be loved or to be good enough, but it's this sense that you can visible see things when you do craft. Either you're a small kid or you're a grown-up, craft has this intense, visible, it's there, where you can see how well you're doing. You can have all these small micro success experiences and all these small visible achievements that we can see produces small amounts of dopamine, and dopamine is our reward hormone. So whenever we are doing something where we succeed in it and we can see, oh, I knitted this, or I carved this, or I did this kind of craft. It could also be food or whatever we're doing in a craft activity. And you can see how well you're doing, and you can have all these success experiences. And dopamine is something that comes or arises in our body whenever we are succeeding in something that our body or our mind or our brain thought, oh, I might not be able to do this. But when we do it, when we succeed in something that could not succeed or could be a failure, that is where the body produces dopamine. So it's whenever we overcome a challenge, that is when dopamine arises in our body. And dopamine also levels up the body's serotonin level. So that is why craft also have a beneficial effects on our overall well-being. So these effects is what produces all the overall sensation in our body that says, oh, this was a great time. I love doing craft. And whenever we experience these effects that's under the dome, we will have the sensation in our body saying, oh, that was amazing. And that is what brings the sensation of, this is a passion. This is something that I love doing. The task itself was something that was worth doing. And whenever a human being is doing something where we could say, I love doing this. This was a purpose in itself. I didn't look forward to get this over and done with. I just love doing it. That is a passion. And every single person on the planet should have something that we could call a passion or a hobby or something that's worth doing on its own, not because we want to get it over and done with. And whenever we are experiencing these effects, whether we are a child or we are grown up, then we will experience that this is amazing. And then we will have nurtured our passion. And doing our passion is what links directly into the overall sense of well-being. Psychological well-being is what we all need. And we know from studies, it's not my studies, but from 55 years of studying what is the underlying needs that everyone needs to have met in order to have psychological well-being. And that is the need for autonomy, the need for relatedness, and the need for competence. And I can see through my research that doing something that you love, where you experience all these effects that I have named under the dome, it's the direct link into psychological well-being, because autonomy is the notion of that you are doing something wholeheartedly, and you're doing it because you can feel that this task that I am doing, I do it because I can sense that I have free will, and I do it with my free will. And the other need that everyone needs to have met is this sensation of, I feel competent. I can practice without being ridiculed, or I can practice so I can see how well I'm doing. And I feel related to something someone and something that's bigger than me. And doing craft is something where I can see all of these three needs are miraculously very easily met, because we have something that we are completely wholehearted into because we love doing it, and we can choose the level of difficulty often ourselves, and we can be related to. It's easier for people to be and to feel related when we are, or social connected when we are doing something common third. It's easier for people to be able to be with other people. For a child, for someone who's sick, for someone who's lonely, if we are doing something common third, if we are doing a craft activity together, silence is not awkward. It's okay to be silent when we are doing things together. And it's so much easier to feel related when we are thinking about who we are doing maybe a craft activity for. So this model shows that the effects of the 5 effects under the dome, whenever we are doing craft, we have all these overall effects that links back to the sensation of this was worth doing. I have really done whatever I wanted to for this half an hour, 2 hours, and that will promote the sensation of, yeah, this is a passion. It will create well-being because it undermines, or it links back to feeding these fundamental needs for well-being, psychological well-being. So that was, and the thing about the dome over our head, when people are engaged in something where they are intrinsically motivated and they feel all these needs met, then that is the membrane that will prevent us from having stress, rest, depression, anxiety, and meaninglessness. And the one thing that I will really stress in this presentation is that when people are in flow, flow is the feeling of optimal experience, or it's a sensation in our body when we are completely engaged in one activity. And there's a perfect balance between the challenge that we are sitting in front with, maybe your knitting pattern, or when we are doing food, and we have the skill to meet the challenge. So it's not too difficult. We don't feel stress, and it's not too boring. So we feel that we are unengaged. So our mind starts to wonder that we are bored. But that's perfect balance between skill and challenge. And we can see what lies in front of us. We can see the proximal goal, and we have feedback from the material. And flow is not something that only craft can provide for us, but the thing that needs to be in place in order for people to experience flow, this optimal experience, or this meaningful self-forgetfulness. Flow is also meaningful self-forgetfulness, because when our complete consciousness is focused on a task outside yourself, then you don't have to be, you cannot have thoughts about, oh, I feel lonely, or I feel pain, or I feel anything that will spiral my negative thoughts. So flow state is a state where we can measure that the heart rate is a little lower, and we can measure that people's stress response in their body, both adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol, that is, there's no stress response in the body when we are in flow. And that's not very intuitively easy to understand, because most people think that what lowers stress response in our body is when we do nothing. So this advice people often get, that, oh, you should relax and do nothing. That is actually not a very good advice. So if we look about what is it that craft is, why is it so craft is very healthy, that is also when we are in flow state, because doing something where the task is perfectly balanced, the skill that we have to meet the challenge is not too big or too low, then the body doesn't need to produce stress hormones. So the good advice when people feel stress or are a bit down is actually go home, take care of yourself, and do a task that is sufficiently challenging, not too much and not too little. So if I were to sum up some of these effects, that why does craft have a calming effect? That is maybe the other effect from flow. Flow is the complete, when you have complete intense focus on a task outside yourself. But there's also another overall effect with craft, and that's why around life stages, we all need to be aware of how we can calm ourselves down, because stress and is an underlying component in all kinds of diseases. So if I should come with this maybe core things that is important to know about why craft have a calming effect, is that this deep engagement or immersion in a craft activity, that leads to reduced self-awareness, because your complete mind, your consciousness is locked into the activity with your full attention. Our 120 bits per second attention that we all have is completely engaged in an activity outside yourself. Or it could be that we have a connected activity that also combines two things. If, for instance, that we are looking at the television, talking to someone, listening to something while doing craft, that is a coupled activity. And that is also a very good thing to have this deep engagement. And reduce self-awareness, that is what relieves stress. So we don't have a mind wandering, thinking about the future or the past, or maybe someone doesn't want to talk to me, or there's something wrong with me. Every time our mind is somewhere else than our body, meaning that our mind is in the future, in the past, in our relationship, that is potential what creates stress. So everything that can keep our body and our thought aligned, that is when we can reduce or relieve stress. And craft repetitive nature activates the parasympathetic nervous system that signals calm and no danger. And that is why so many people, whether you're a child or you're a grown-up, whenever you're doing something that has these rhythmic, repetitive movements, and so much craft have that, that is a signal to the nervous system that there's no danger. And that is also why people, when they have a baby in their arms, you don't need to learn to do this with a baby, because we know that these movements are activating a calming effect. So this is a very short introduction to why does craft have a calming effect, and what is the overall psychological effects of doing craft, meaning that we need to have something that engages us in a flow activity and calmness and evokes positive emotions, and do something where we are feeling achievement, that we achieve something where we can see how well we're doing, and also leading back to that we have always done craft as a dry, warm, fed need in our body, and it activates all the neurons in our body because we need to learn something new. And the overall effects of having a passion, having something that we love doing, is what directly engages us in these needs we all need to have fulfilled in order to have psychological well-being. So thank you all for listening, and you can look much more into my work on craftpsychology.com, and I hope to see you all out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anna, for your fantastic presentation. And we can share some links in the chat as well to your work. So thank you so much. So we will be moving now to our case studies. And the first case study is relating to the role of craft in well-being during childhood. And I would like to introduce Nicky Dewar, who is the Director of Programs at Crafts Council UK. So the Crafts Council UK is a national organisation that oversees research, policy, collections and education to shape the strategic direction of the UK craft sector. And relating to the new European Bauhaus principle of inclusion, Nicky will share how their nationwide initiative Craft School integrates hands-on making into the school curriculum to give vulnerable youth a sense of agency, belonging and social integration. Nicky, thank you so much for being with us. I welcome you now to share your screen to start your presentation. And to our audience, please keep your questions coming in the Q&A.
Morning, everybody. It's really lovely to be here. I'm just getting my presentation up and running. And it's really lovely to be able to be invited to talk about something that's so close to my heart. And thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm have a brilliant job of leading a wide-ranging activity across for our sector across the UK. I mean, we've been around since 1971, and people perhaps know us really well for the wonderful collection we have. We have a really grand building that we sometimes do brilliant exhibitions in, and we have an annual fair called Collect. But perhaps we're less known for some of the other strands of the work and those activities, I think, that really respond very directly to the benefits that Anne has really well articulated in her opening speech and what I'm going to talk about today. So this is a wonderful diagram that we've got, which really attempts to show the breadth of the work that we do and how all of our strands are connected. And I think that it's really important to remember about the connections that we're making in different areas of our work. And we talk about it being a maker cycle. And we have three core communities within that maker cycle. Makers of today, makers of tomorrow, and change makers. And our activities are really carefully devised to meet the needs of these different communities. And everybody is represented in this diagram. And I think those needs that everybody talks about, there is a lot of those needs. And I'm going to pick up on some of that. I think what Anne's given us is a really powerful overview of the wide-ranging benefits of craft. You all know this, they're all going to resonate. You guys are the ambassadors of craft and you bring to life examples of those benefits every day. I suppose the question is, why is it perhaps not happening everywhere and with everyone? And I think the reality is that the craft sector is really fighting hard for that value to be seen, to be understood, to be appreciated and supported. The reality is that our sector is quite fragile and vulnerable. It has a historic lack of infrastructure and investment, and that creates a systemic challenge that leaves both the work and the people behind the work undervalued. We felt what was missing was a clear articulation of what the craft practice actually looks like, why those benefits look like, and why it matters. And so we've articulated that through something we call Make First, a pedagogy that allows us to stop just saying craft is important, but showing how it's important, making that impact tangible, real, and really importantly, relatable. So it's about showing those things. It's about showing how it creates new skills, confidences in education. It's about showing how it releases those happy hormones Anne was mentioning when we make together, how that can help us forge community links or supports rehabilitation or makes us feel better. It's about showing how it kickstarts creative practices, renewing businesses, innovating products or services. It's about showing new ways to think about being part of a team, working better, delivering goals with new energy in any corporate setting. So although we've deliberately designed Make First to feel playful and engaging, don't be fooled, its impact is immediate. What it offers is a really clear articulation of the power of craft, a simple way of naming something that many of us have always instinctively known, but not always had the language for. It makes the implicit visible. It gives language and shape to experience. And because it feels accessible and familiar, it resonates, it validates practice, gives permission, and helps makers, facilitators, animators, and producers feel recognised in what they do. And across a diverse sector, which the craft sector is, it creates a shared language, that golden thread that connects our practice. So how does that work in practice for us? For us, that starting point was being education and a response to the profound lack of making a material experimentation in children's lives at schools. Crafts Council has long delivered education interventions, each one learning from the last and adapting to shifts in policy, in need and in funding. Craft School is our current approach. It focuses on teachers, on their confidence, skills, and knowledge, rather than direct delivery to learners, because we know that investing in one teacher can shape the experience of thousands of children over the course of a career. Many of those teachers that we engage with would not describe themselves as creative. They aren't the art specialists. And it's been important to recognise that and to make everybody feel like this has been something they can engage. To do that, we've developed high quality training, toolkits, resources, live online sessions, bringing together makers and our own expert team to introduce and explore a wide range of practices connected to challenges. All of this supported by guidance, advice, and the Make First pedagogy. Challenges that we've delivered through Craft School have evolved every 2 years, and we're just about to launch the second year of Jaslene's challenge. This slide captures the partners we've worked with and the themes we've explored through each challenge. By evolving the challenges, we can respond to different key topics, work with new partners, reach more schools. We began with Yinka Ilori. And if you don't know his work, do look him up. He's extraordinary. He's vibrant, generous, and impossible to define through just one discipline. His challenge allowed us to disrupt assumptions on who was a maker, whilst exploring the notion of identity through making. The Eden Project marked a shift for us, working with a major institution and focus on sustainability, a theme we knew resonated strongly with children and one that many teachers were keen to explore in ways that went beyond the usual curriculum lens. Craft opened up new and imaginative ways to explore these questions. Our current challenge with Turner Prize winning Jaslyn Kerr feels especially relevant to the polarised world many children are growing up in. By exploring community through craft, we're offering a gentle and a thoughtful way for young people to reflect on who and what matters to them. So these numbers reflect the impact we've made over the last 5 years so far with Craft School, and there's real scale here. But what matters perhaps most is what sits behind it. A positive shift in teaching, richer classroom practice, and more children experiencing the value of making firsthand. And I think it's important to highlight that the learners and settings involved here span a real breadth of different types of situations. We have a huge number of learners and schools who specialised in special needs, and we have more and more early years coming online as well. Those numbers then are backed up by what we hear in our evaluation and in the conversations we have with our teachers. We're seeing teachers grow in confidence, giving pupils more freedom, working with a wider range of materials, focusing more on process over product, bringing more craft into everyday teaching. Perhaps what excites me most is hearing that teachers are rediscovering their own joy in teaching and the playfulness in their own creativity. This is just one quote from one of our teachers. And it's the step change that's been made for those who engage with Make First and Craft School that we've considered, how do we further address the challenge of value and recognition? So this summer, we will be launching new awards for teachers and pupils. Linked back to Make First principles, we're going to introduce badging for teachers and badges for learners to work through. We can share how we get on with that with you in the future. And from the pupils' perspectives, we see something equally powerful. They begin to find the words to talk about what they're making, to share ideas with each other, and to take real ownership of their work. There's pride in what they produce, but also joy in the freedom to explore, to make choices, take the lead, and discover that they can do that. And I think at a time when we're seeing in the UK, particularly more and more children leaving school, not going into further education or employment, and that skills agenda being a real priority for our government, it's this work that becomes really important, and our job as an organisation to champion and lobby for support for these types of engagements to happen more. So I'm going to end here by sharing some words from our learners, because I think their voice is really important to hear in this conversation. And I think it was just a really useful reminder that for us, Make First is not just an education approach, but it's a way of seeing the value across many different contexts, absolutely responding to what Anne's been saying. And I think once you start to view the world through that lens, you begin to see its potential everywhere. And so I suppose part of my point today is to ask about how can you use it, how can you be part of it, and how can you help share it? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicky, for sharing your presentation and also about this really important initiative. Now we're going to move on to the next case study. So this second case study is relating to the role of craft in well-being during adulthood. And I would like to introduce Alex Finberg, who is the leader and founder of Woodcrafters. So Woodcrafters is a UK-based social enterprise that advances woodcraft for well-being as an evidence-informed mental health intervention, delivering therapeutic workshops and facilitator training rooted in green social prescribing. Relating to the new European Bauhaus principle of aesthetics, we have invited Alex to share how the beauty of natural materials and the slow, deliberate process of working with them contributes directly to mindfulness and mental stability in adult life. So Alex, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to share your screen to start your presentation, and a reminder to our audience to submit any questions in the Q&A.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really wonderful to be here and to be in such great company. I'm going to be sharing a presentation today on harnessing the therapeutic benefits of woodcraft to foster individual and collective well-being. So I'm the founder of Woodcrafters, and I'm a craftsperson, author, and woodcraft tutor based in the UK. I previously worked in mental health adult recovery colleges, and my job was to design, develop, and co-facilitate craft, art, and volunteering programs for adults with mental health support needs. And I witnessed there the first-hand profound benefits that craft can have on mental health and particularly addiction recovery in adults from a whole range of socioeconomic backgrounds. And in 2020, I was commissioned by the NHS Devon Recovery Learning Community to run Woodcraft sessions, which evolved into what we now call Woodcraft for Wellbeing. I couldn't resist getting some of my spoon carving in. So these are some of the hand-carved spoons that I make and encourage others to do. And this is a Woodcraft for Wellbeing session in flow. So a bit about our work. Well, we run nature-based Woodcraft for Wellbeing sessions for adults and whittling for wellbeing programs for children. So we're using nature-based woodcraft as a tool for fostering individual and collective wellbeing. And we're gathering, sharing, and putting research into practice. So there's been this wonderful study that's been released from the University of Eastern Finland, and building on Dr. Kirketerp's work, we are using this research to inform our practice. And we're also training practitioners in how to teach woodcraft with a particular focus on mental health and wellbeing as a social prescribing offer. And I'll talk about what social prescribing is shortly. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. And last but not least, we're developing a network of professionally licensed practitioners across Europe and the UK who are spreading the therapeutic benefits of craft in their communities, in clinical settings, and within organizations and businesses. So what's the difference between coming to a Woodcraft for Wellbeing session and an ordinary woodworking workshop? Well, our job is to make our craft activities simple and accessible. So we're carving simple, tangible objects such as spoons and spatulas. We're fostering mindful carving techniques and the flow state, which Anna so beautifully and eloquently laid out for us. There is such a deeply profound and immersive experience that I'm sure many of us have experienced when we are deeply immersed in craft. And our job is really to foster that mindful carving space, and particularly in nature where there is this ability to restore our attention and benefit from time out in the woods, listening to the bird song. It's really important that our practitioners are trauma informed and mental health aware. So they're working with a diverse range of groups. It really struck me in Nicky's presentation, the idea that craft as self-care is really quite often for only those who can afford it. And we're really trying to break down barriers to access and make our sessions affordable and accessible. So our sessions are grant funded and or subsidized so that people can afford to come. And they're community focused and co-produced. The idea is that the people, including the adults and children who access our sessions, have a say in how the sessions are run and can take an active part in their delivery. I really like this quote by Dr. Kelly Lambert. I think it sums up quite a lot of why many of us enjoy craft. It's creating a tangible, visible, meaningful object which can bring so much satisfaction and sense of purpose. So here's some of the wooden spatulas that some of our woodcrafters have created together. We are operating in the midst of an adult mental health crisis. So 1 in 6 adults are living with common mental health problems in the UK. Anxiety and depression have risen sharply, and poverty, rural isolation compound these risks. And unfortunately, it's said that loneliness can be as damaging to health as smoking. So the statistics paint quite a bleak picture. And my belief is that we all have a role to play in our communities, maybe as craftspeople or ambassadors, to step up and provide some support to people. Woodcrafters are doing our bit. So we found that 3 active ingredients combine to underpin why crafting in nature is good for you. Nature connection is proven to lower cortisol, lower blood pressure and rumination, and 120 minutes a week in nature is linked to better health and well-being. We've heard a bit about, or quite a lot about, how craft can help us drop into the flow state, reduce stress and anxiety, bring in a sense of calm and peace. And 45 minutes of crafting has been proved to lower cortisol. And we heard earlier about competence, autonomy, and social relatedness. The third active ingredient for us is all about community. So shared making, peer support, being amongst others. The beauty of carving together in a circle is we don't necessarily have eye contact. We're focused. We're dropped into the zone of focusing on this tangible project, and conversation arises naturally and can flow. And quite often we can express ourselves, can express emotions, can express stress in a way that perhaps we wouldn't ordinarily. So subtly, it is actually an extremely powerful intervention when held in the right way. So we're trying to foster flow. We're trying to make sessions accessible. We're gathering outcomes and improving our practice. Woodcrafters sit within the field of green social prescribing. So Woodcrafters are members of the National Academy for Social Prescribing. So we receive referrals from healthcare providers, doctors, social prescribing link workers, and partner organizations, and anyone can attend a session via self-referral. As mentioned, we try and make our sessions accessible and affordable. We're working in nature using craft and community as a model for fostering mental health and well-being. And we're supporting adults and families with a range of support needs. So people who come to us quite often have anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, or enduring mental health diagnoses. We work with marginalized groups, paid carers, unpaid carers, people in recovery. There are so many different groups who can benefit from craft, and it shouldn't just be for people who can afford it. Everyone, I believe, in this fast-paced, tech-focused world needs some time out in nature, and carving woodcraft can be a wonderfully restorative practice to take up. And our outcomes paint a really positive picture. We've noted that there's a real mood uplift from coming to our sessions. There's a 100% recommendation rate. People who come to our sessions often get the bug and want to do more and more carving. Connection with nature is one of our highest outcomes, and we have recorded strong gains in mental well-being, confidence, and sense of belonging. So this ties into some of the research we've been hearing about. And the benefits outlast the session. So 74% have kept carving at home. We're quietly trying to get people hooked on woodcraft, because it can be such a wonderfully rewarding craft to take up at home and doesn't require expensive tools, etc. It can be a knife-based craft, which really requires a stick and one or two simple tools. It's really heartening to hear that 100% of people who've come through our programs are now prioritizing time outdoors as well to regulate their mood. We also sit within this kind of broader field of ecotherapy, of nature connection, and we are increasingly interested in building and fostering relationships with organizations who provide nature connection opportunities as well. Our social return on investment is a conservative estimate at £6.59, which means for every £1 invested, we're returning £6.59 of value. And this is basically the forecasted amount that we are reducing burdens on clinical healthcare provision and mental health services. The idea is that we're providing a low-cost, community-focused service that anyone can come to, share, connect with others, practice craft, and become empowered to take ownership of our own mental health, reduce stress, learn about self-care, and partake in community. I think this quite sums it up quite well. And I mentioned micro successes. I really like this quote from Craft Psychology. As the product is created, I'll let you read this. I think it's all about these micro successes in craft, which can create positive emotions. We're witnessing that firsthand. When you carve a wooden object and you meet the resistance of the grain, it's not easy. We can meet our learning edge and have many frustrations, but when we can actually tangibly see this progress of an object being carved, it can really be the most rewarding journey to take part in, and it's highly addictive in a good way. So we'd love you to join, whether you're undertaking research into the area of craft for wellbeing. We'd love to hear from you. We are offering regular training sessions for Woodcrafters practitioners who are interested in fostering the mental health and wellbeing benefits in their own communities. And we're, of course, running Woodcraft sessions. We'd love you to join us. Our next trainings are coming up in September, based in South Devon. You can find out more about our work at woodcrafters.uk, and feel free to reach out via email directly to me. Thank you very much for listening and for having me on.
Thanks a lot to Alex for that wonderful presentation and for sharing about Woodcrafters. It was very interesting also to have these statistics as well. And we see a lot of questions coming in the Q&A. So we move now to our final life stage case study. This is relating to the role of craft in well-being in our senior years. And I would like to introduce Helena McAteer, who is the secretary of the Borris Lacemakers in Ireland. Borris Lacemakers is a voluntary community group dedicated to the revival and preservation of historic traditional Irish lacemaking, working closely with local communities to keep this rare heritage craft alive. Relating to the new European Bauhaus principle of sustainability, Helena will share how her Borris Lace initiative serves as a sustainable framework for active aging and community resilience, using creative outreach models to combat rural isolation and support senior well-being. Hi, Helena, very welcome to you. Please go ahead and share your screen to start your presentation. And to our audience, this is your final reminder to submit your questions into the Q&A box. We will be following with the Q&A after Helena's presentation. Just checking if Helena is there. Yes.
Okay, and
now your video is there.
okay.
And
Am I
when
okay, Tom?
Yes, I can hear and see you. And when you can share your screen, and I will close my one. There you go.
Okay. Thank you,
Perfect.
Siobhan, and hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today to talk about two innovative and unique projects Borris Lacemakers were involved with, the Borris Lace by Post and the Borris Lace Exchange. Both projects were funded by Creative Ireland Carlow with the wonderful support of Carlow Arts Services. Just to put Borris Lace in context, Borris is a village in County Carlow in the southeast of Ireland and situated in the southern part of the county. The 2022 census shows it with a population of 702 people, but it's the hub for a large rural hinterland. Borris is a charming Georgian village nestled in the valley of the River Barrow. One side of the village is dominated by Borris House and its grounds, and this is the ancestral home of the McMurrough Kavanaghs, an ancient Irish family. In 1846, at the height of the Great Famine in Ireland, Lady Harriet McMurrough of Borris House set up the Borris lace industry as a way to provide support to families during a time of great hardship. Lady Harriet was artistic and drew many of the designs herself, inspired by lace she brought back from her travels in Europe. Borris lace is a needle lace. The tape is sewn down along the pattern and decorative infill stitches are worked between the tapes. It is unique in its style and its flowing continuous designs, some of which are based on native plants. Borris Lacemakers was established in 2016. The main aims of the group are to revive and preserve the art of lace making in Borris, County Carlow, and to contribute to art and heritage in the Borris community and beyond. We currently have 30 members and are affiliated with the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland and active members of the Laces of Ireland network. Having given you that brief background, I will move on now to the Borris Lace Post project. Towards the end of 2021, when Ireland was still in lockdown, we were contacted by Sinead Dowling and Aileen Nolan from Carlow Arts Office about a Creative Ireland Creativity and Older Age project. This programme would be jointly supported by Creative Ireland, the European Craft Hub, and co-funded by the EU Creative Europe programme. Its aims were to engage people in a creative activity in a COVID-safe way, while helping to alleviate the loneliness and isolation many people were experiencing at that time. In March, our committee members attended a Zoom meeting with Aileen and Sinead, and two local artists, Ali Nolan and Jules Michael. We devised the Lace by Post project. Its remit was to run over a 6-month period and to include people from County Carlow over 65 interested in craft, along with residents from Borris Lodge Nursing Home and members of the Borris and Rahana active retired groups. Ali and Jules designed special packs for the project. Borris Lacemakers provided input on the lace heritage, designs and materials. It was generally agreed that teaching the actual lace making skills remotely would be too difficult, so people could use the regular stitching skills they already had. Borris Lace by Post was launched in May 2021 with notices in local newspapers and social media. 30 people signed up to the project. Each month, participants received a pack in the post with materials, instructions, and stamped addressed envelopes to return their responses to the artists. It was a step-by-step process to enable participants to make their own individual designs and stitch creations inspired by Borris lace. The introductory pack was sent out in June. It included the story of Borris lace and information on Borris Lacemakers. It outlined the stages of the project and included a questionnaire to help understand what craft skills people had and what they would like to learn. Also, whether they had access to technology like a laptop or smartphone or would prefer printed instructions. It invited people to share any memories or stories they had about Borris lace. The July pack included everything needed to explore traditional Borris lace design from the Borris House archives. A specifically designed lace notebook supported participants to recreate their favourite design in detail. Their designs were then posted back to the artists, who prepared the artwork to be printed on fabric for the next stage of the project. Packs 3 and 4 focused on exploring stitching techniques based on the design participants had chosen. Some participants expressed an interest in learning the actual Borris lace stitching, so Ali, Jules and myself got together and made a video and an instructional sheet to teach the basic fine net stitch. As you can see, the packs were beautifully presented with attention to every detail. I think there's something nostalgic about receiving these beautiful packages in the post, a bit like getting a very special present. and participants later remarked that this attention to detail and the sense of the personal was particularly important, given the difficult, isolated times we were living in. The final pack included a large embroidery hoop with their chosen design on their favourite background colour, along with all materials needed to work on their design. This sample on the right is a piece which was made by Mary Murphy from St. Mullins. As you can see, Mary mastered the Borris lace stitching. Mary passed away in 2022, and her sister Bridget, who is a member of Borris Lacemakers, often recalls how much this project helped Mary through her illness and the challenges of COVID. Residents from Borris Lodge Nursing Home worked on their packs with care staff, and towards the end of the programme, Ali and Jules were able to go in to work with them on their final piece. It was a lovely opportunity to chat and to stitch. The exhibition opening was on the 3rd of December in the Old Laundry in Borris House. It was wonderful to come together and see the culmination of all the work. This is Mary Murphy, whose lovely piece I showed you earlier. To bring the event out into the community, a light show created by artist Carolyn Conway, based on Borris lace by post, was projected onto the gate lodge at Borris House that evening. The exhibition displayed work from all stages of the project. Residents from Borris Lodge Nursing Home attended the exhibition the following day. This is me on the right with my mum. I have to say, it was a beautiful occasion and indeed a wonderful celebration of creativity in older age. I will now move on to the Borris Lace Exchange. The success of the Borris Lace by Post inspired the Borris Lace Exchange project. The project was launched in 2023, once again supported by Carlow County Council, Creative Ireland Carlow, the EU Craft Hub, and co-funded by the EU Creative Europe programme. This project aimed to widen the reach of Borris Lace and include Borris Men's Shed, along with Borris Lodge Nursing Home and Borris Lacemakers. We were delighted to have Ali and Jules on board again, and the project linked in with McAteer Hub in Italy. There were various parts to this programme. For Borris Lacemakers, it was an opportunity to reimagine Borris lace through other art forms. We did a series of workshops with Jules where we drew up our own designs. Then we carved them in clay to make a mould and filled it with an acrylic resin to form individual sculptural pieces. Local artist Michelle Byrne worked with Jules on the sculptural workshops. We had great fun. Our workshops with Ali focused on designing and making a quilt. Ali is an expert in presenting beautifully designed and structured packs, which allowed us to explore design in a fun and non-challenging way. We were keen to include Borris lace stitching, so one side of the quilt would highlight this. In April, a group visited McAteer in Italy, linking in with McAteer Hub. The group included, among others, Sinead Dowling and Aileen Nolan from Carlow Arts Office, Ali Nolan and Jules Michael, and Bridget O'Regan from Borris Lacemakers. It was a wonderful opportunity to share our lace heritage with McAteer craftspeople and for us to learn about their traditional crafts. Ali presented a workshop inspired by Borris lace design with our usual beautifully presented packs, and this was a great success. Some of those designs are included on the quilt. We met Borris Men's Shed in Borris House to view traditional lace and patterns held in the house collection. With Jules, they devised a garden bench engraved with Borris lace designs. As Lady Harriet had included oak leaf motifs in the original Borris lace samples, the wood from the bench came from the grounds of Borris House. This bench was later presented to Borris Lodge Nursing Home. Jules and Michelle worked with residents of Borris Lodge Nursing Home, making imprints of native plants from Borris woods in clay, referencing again that many of the original Borris lace designs are based on wild plants. Residents first displayed their pieces in the nursing home in an exhibition called Gentle Traces. This won an Age and Opportunity Best Practice Arts in Nursing Home National Award. The EU Craft Hub exhibition was launched in Visual Carlow in August 23 and included Borris Lacemakers sculptural pieces, which were called Lines Cast, Borris Lodge Nursing Home's Gentle Traces, along with samples of old and new Borris lace. The quilt was still a work in progress, and we went into Visual to work on it during the exhibition. It was a lovely opportunity to meet people and talk about the project. The Borris Lace Exchange exhibition was held in Borris House in December 23 to bring together all the strands of the project and all the groups and participants involved. The exhibition was a wonderful opportunity for everyone to come together and celebrate a year's work and collaboration. The Borris Lace by Post and Borris Lace Exchange projects were awarded the Sustaining the Arts Award at the 2023 Chambers Ireland Excellence in Local Government Awards. To quote an article at the time, the projects not only provided a wonderful creative outlet for the community, but also mitigated social and rural isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic. Borris Lacemakers are very proud to have been involved in these two creative projects, the Borris Lace by Post and Borris Lace Exchange. Through these programmes, we formed strong and lasting connections, celebrated creativity in older age, and shared our local lace heritage within our own community and beyond. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Helena, for your presentation. It was really interesting to hear about the different initiatives that you have through the Borris Lacemakers. So we're now going to open up the floor for our Q&A session. And perhaps, Helena, you can close your, stop your screen share.
Okay, stop share.
Perfect. Very good. And you can stay on the line there because I'll invite the rest of our speakers to join us now on the panel. Great. So I see that we've received quite a few questions from our audience. So thank you so much for engaging with us. And I'd also like to share with our speakers that we've been receiving a lot of comments in the chat saying thank you and also expressing how inspiring your presentations are. So that's great. So let me have a look at the questions. We're going to start with some of the top voted questions, and we're going to address one per speaker, and then we'll continue around until our time is up. We have approximately 20-25 minutes. So to help us answer as many as we can, we kindly ask you to also keep your responses nice and brief. So we're going to start with a question for Anna. This question was submitted by Anna Chaplin Andrews. And she says, can you talk a bit about people who don't consider themselves creative or struggle with perfectionism and find it hard to enjoy crafting? She says, I teach craft workshops and I find these people especially interesting. I'd love to understand how I can help them benefit more from these activities.
Well, I hear that comment a lot. I'm not very creative. And one of the key things that I found when I looked at all my empirical work that was it ended out in two different areas, which I have called crafts that are recreational, meaning craft where you have step-by-step introductions, and the other end of the line that is creative works, which are more open-ended and where you are creating something where you are constantly making all the choices yourself. And what I have found is that there's no health beneficial extra point from doing something that is open-ended. So my advice for you would be really to enhance that doing something that is recreational, meaning something that has a step-by-step introduction, something where you are following a very thorough pattern that is equally flow generating. You could also see it in a knitting pattern or people who are doing Lego. That is immensely step-by-step, and it is engaging and it's easy to be with others. And it's trying to minimize that sense that craft is only worth doing if you are creating something or developing something that is open-ended. No, the recreational high structure, meaning that it is something where you are guided and you are handheld, so to speak, in something where you can easily follow a video introduction, or something that you as an instructor maybe can be more lowering the pressure of the guidance of something that is completely guided with instruction. That is something where people for the first 30 minutes should feel guided and has a low entry thing where you can manage by doing it, because there's a step-by-step guide. So don't be afraid as an instructor to have quite high structure and very good, thorough instruction step by step, because when people have a success experience by doing something high structure, it's easier for them afterward to feel success, and they feel that they have done something, and then they might be able to do something that has a lower structure, meaning more creative work afterwards. So the recreational and creative, meaning high structure, low structure, is a very good thing to understand, that the body is not snobbish about where the flow comes from. It's equally health beneficial to do something that has high structure, recreational, step by step. So just lean into being a very thorough and quite strict instructor. That is maybe where people can feel more confidence.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anna. So our next question is for Nicky, and this question was submitted by Naomi Clark-Mordy. And she asks, on one of your slides, you say that the rise of hobbyists distorts the market. What do you mean by this? So Nicky, I know you already responded within the chat, but it'd be great if you can kind of answer that question and also expand on it a little bit more, particularly to understand the hobby space in contrast to the kind of professional craftsperson space, and what are the opportunities for the sector in general, what these two segments might hold.
Yeah, I think this is interesting in this context. I think because it's obviously thinking about just how complicated I think the sector is for people to engage in it as a way to earn a living at the moment. And I think it was recognizing that the picture for craft, whether that's as how do we make sure there's access to it, as Alex talked about, in terms of everybody just feeling like it's something within their everyday lives they can pick up as a hobby. Where's the time and the money coming to do that? Where is it's completely been removed from our education systems. It's becoming harder and harder as a maker to earn part or all of your income to pay your bills from craft these days. And I think that slide was about really sort of perhaps showing that all of those wonderful benefits that we know exist are undermined by this lack of infrastructure and the systemic challenges that we face across all of those elements of our ecosystem. And I think one of the things that we're hearing from craft businesses who it's their entire livelihood is making is that the shift in both hobbyists and I would say perhaps and I know this is being addressed more and more, but the cheap imports that are stealing people's designs, and we've got AI now coming in and sort of mimicking and sort of producing things mass produced that's the much lower quality, is really challenging for makers who are earning their money. And I think that really recognizing that there's a really complicated picture. So when you come back into schools and education and children, trying to talk about craft as a potential career direction for people is really hard, actually, because that's what the government is currently focusing on, is pipeline of talent into our creative industries, into jobs. We're seeing more and more young people not leaving school with something else to do. So I think priorities in education are really challenging for us, and you're then faced with a system that's completely been underinvested in and hasn't got the value. And so our makers are saying that this complex situation is not helping some of that. So it's part of a really sort of complex ecosystem of different elements of it, where well-being and that ability to make is just because it has all of these other impacts and connections to a wider set of priorities and parts of our system, I think. I've rambled there. I don't know if I've answered the question, but hopefully that's sort of explained why I thought it was useful to get a sense of the bigger picture.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Nicky. So our next question is for Alex, and this was submitted by Shannon McDonnell as well as Claire Webb in a kind of similar topic. So Shannon has asked, Alex, can you share anything about what is working well or not so well about the social prescribing model in the UK? And then Claire asks, where does funding come from for social prescribing? And what's the number one criteria that you would say secures your funding, please?
Thank you. I'm going to address those questions separately. So, what's working well within social prescribing? I would say, to be realistic, in some ways, things have gone a little bit backwards in the UK with austerity measures. We have seen, since my career working in mental health recovery, we've seen rollbacks in funding for craft programs, for arts in school, crafts in school, etc. And it's fantastic hearing the great work that Craft Council are doing in and amongst that. And of course, there's great work happening. But our work was previously funded by the NHS as well, and cuts to those mental health services have been rolled back. So it's a challenging environment right now to operate a social prescribing service. What's working well is, the outcomes. So when we show people the outcomes that we've got, when we show people the social return on investment we're making, these figures, it's kind of a no-brainer. The challenge is that we're quite often seen, craft can be seen as kind of the fluffy stuff around the edge, which doesn't justify the funding that perhaps clinical services need. And I understand that, policymakers have got to juggle these budgets and make hard decisions. So what's working well is when we share positive case studies, when we actually develop relationships with commissioners and people who are holding the purse strings, they can see the value of what we do, then we win contracts. We get funding from a wide range of sources. So UK grant funders, we secure private donations. At this stage, it's nature and craft connection is having a bit of a moment in the spotlight, which is really positive. So there are grant funds available for the kind of work that we do. That may not last, so we try not to become too reliant on grant funding if possible. This is one of the challenges that many of us face running social enterprises, is that we need to generate traded income as well. And so that's something we're trying to do with Woodcrafters. I hope that answers your questions around what's working well and a bit about funding. I'm very happy to talk more about grant funding. It's a whole sort of big topic in itself.
Thank you so much, Alex. So to Helena, we didn't have any direct questions in the Q&A, but we had quite a few comments in the chat section. One from Brenda Silke, who said, Helena, it might be interesting to link your project in County Carlow, Ireland, to a similar group in Italy. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I think she shared that before you had expanded and shared that you had already made those connections there, but maybe you can share a little more on that. I will just unmute you. 1 second. There you go.
Borris Lacemakers are always interested in making connections, especially as the traditional Borris lace designs were inspired by lace Lady Harriet picked up on her travels in Italy and Greece. We're currently involved with a program called Craftsworks through Carlo Enterprise, linking in with Thessaloniki in Greece. And a number of our members went out to Thessaloniki last week to teach Borris lace to participants there. So yeah, we're always open to making connections. And maybe if they get in touch with us via email, borrislacemakers@gmail.com, or via our Facebook page.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helena. So we might have time for another question each, if we keep it brief. So I'll go back to Anna. We have a question submitted by Tim Granger. Can you talk a bit about what are the implications on the positive effects of crafting if we're listening to music, a podcast, or watching TV at the same time while crafting? I will just unmute you there, Anna.
Thank you. That was a great question, because I have developed this concept of talking about what I call coupled activities. So whenever we are doing something where we have access attention, surplus attention, meaning that we experience it, or imagine that you have a ball of attention, your full attention, say that's technically it's actually 120 bit per second attention. And whenever we are just listening, if we are listening or looking at TV or listening to a podcast or something, usually when we are not producing an answer, when we are not engaged in a conversation where we are producing something, a certain answer to something, then we are only using 50% of our attention. So usually when we are looking or listening or in a meeting or something, then our surplus attention will zoom out and start to wonder and start to think about what I'm having for dinner tomorrow, or my task for tomorrow, or maybe my past or my social relations, and that surplus attention can make us be unaware or unattentive or forget things because we are not aware of the present moment or the things that we are supposed to be present on. So doing something where we are doing a very automated craft activity while listening, while in a meeting where we're only listening. So the coupled activity is where you are doing something completely automated while listening. That closes the surplus attention. So you have deeper attention, and it's proven that you can focus longer and you can remember everything because your mind is not zooming out because you are closing the surplus attention. So it's very good for people to be able to be attentive and to be focused on meetings, or also, so you could say you're not getting bored. Actually, it's because you're not zooming out and being self-distracted, or you are distracting yourself from within. So a craft activity that is completely automated, that only uses 50% of your attention, plus the thing that you are watching only using 50% of, then that in combination will have a complete shutdown of your surplus attention. So actually it's very good for our wellness or well-being or health promoting effects of doing craft if we can use it as a mean to focus deeper and focus longer, because it's easier to be with others, and it's easier to be with in a setting where you are only listening. So coupled activity, meaning that you are coupling listening and an automated activity. That is a very good way to look at while doing something in combination of crafting is a good thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. I feel like we could probably listen to you for hours about this topic, and also our other speakers as well. It's very fascinating. We have time for one more question, so I'm actually going to direct this to Alex. We have a question submitted by Rosie Basili as well as Sharon McDonough regarding a similar topic of gender. So Rose asks, you highlight the mental health crisis for adults at present. I am a recent graduate from textile design, and I am aware of how many women are actively involved in this sector. I'm wondering if your wood carving in nature is able to engage men in a similar way. I'm aware of the horrifying statistics about men's mental health, and I'm curious to know if men are involved in other craft sectors to help their mental health. And then I'll add to that, Alex then says, what do you see in terms of the gender representation in your wood carving participants? In the US, men don't participate in craft making as much as women do. And given the social implications of not making in community, this is potentially a problem to solve. That's a very large question, Alex.
Thank you. You know, it's funny because in the world of woodwork, there's quite often it's quite a male dominated space, or can be conceived as, and I think is, looking at sort of statistically. So, a lot of my work has been, making sure that actually we're represented, that we're representing and we're accessible to female audiences and broader demographics, so that it's actually an inclusive the other way. So um, it's interesting actually because I run, and a lot of our practitioners run standard workshops, so without necessarily a well-being leaning, and the sort of standard how to carve a bowl workshops are predominantly men, and the well-being actually there's a larger demographic who are women. So it's quite interesting that well-being has that potential draw. So there's we've got this wonderful movement that's was referenced by Helena, the men's sheds movement. So that's been they've got some wonderfully positive outcomes for men's mental health. So they're basically community-based projects where people can come and share tools, specifically men share tools, come together, create. So it's really worth looking into their work. For Woodcraft, I think Woodcraft is a wonderful leveler across ages, demographics, because you don't need many tools, because of this nature connection aspect. Sitting around a fire carving together can reduce all these different barriers, labels, all that. They can fall away. So our job really as practitioners is just to make it as accessible as possible and remove these isms and labels. So yeah, that's what we're committed to, and we're all work in progress. It's we all have our blind spots, and we have to try and make sure we're kind of as transparent and as diversely orientated as we can be.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex. It's so nice to see so many discussions and thoughts in the chat coming in from our audience. So this concludes our webinar today. So I want to share a very big thank you to our speakers for joining us this morning, and of course to our lovely audience for joining us and participating so actively in the Q&A and in the chat. My colleague is sharing some links in the chat, including a link to our report study. Before you leave, I would also like to share some closing information. So we welcome you to subscribe to our newsletter and to follow us on social media to stay connected with our up-and-coming work and events. We also have a podcast called Craft Matters, and we will continue this conversation there. We'll also share a link to that in the chat. So if you missed any part of this session, or if you would like to watch it back and share it with others, the full recording will be available on the ECA YouTube channel within the next few days. We will share a link to our YouTube channel now. And finally, once this webinar ends, a very short feedback survey will pop up on your screen. So we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to complete it, as your feedback helps us to plan more events like this in the future. So thank you again for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you next time.